My name is Melvin Sax. I live in Great Neck, Long Island, and have lived here since 1947. I was a naval officer in the Second World War and reached the rank of lieutenant senior grade, and late in the war took command of the LST 1002. One story I would like to relate is at the time of Pearl Harbor, I was a senior at the City College of New York, and I was directed to, shortly thereafter that date, I was directed to report to the draft board either February or March of 1942. My friends and myself made a choice to try to get into other services than the Army, and we applied for a program that was called the Navy V7 program. To qualify, you had to be between the ages of 20 and 26, a junior or a senior at college or a college graduate, in good health, and your background was checked by the, I believe, the Naval Intelligence. It was called the 90-Day Wonder Program, or at least it was referred to as that, because at the end of 90 days of training, you became an ensign, a commissioned officer in the United States Navy, and sent out to the fleet. I had my training at the University of Notre Dame. We were the first midshipman class to be at the university for that training. Immediately after my commissioning, I reported to the Naval Amphibious Base in Solomons, Maryland, to pick up new ships that were being built, in our case, in Evansville, Indiana. They were called LSTs, which were large landing ships. I went out with a crew and picked up a ship in Evansville, Indiana, the LST 173, took it down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, and from there to the Chesapeake Bay area. Upon arrival, we discovered that we had just missed a convoy that was going to, I think, for the invasion of North Africa. I'm not sure if that was the proper invasion. There were 3 LSTs. As a result, we were made a training group in the Chesapeake Bay, training these newly formed crews that were going to pick up LSTs. They stayed aboard our ship for 2 weeks. Each one was being trained by the one on ship's crew who had the particular job. We continued doing that training for a number of months. And then we were brought back into the Navy Yard to be sent over prepared for another invasion, I believe, of Southern Europe. Going up the channel to the Navy Yard, I had an earache. As soon as we tied up to the dock and went over to the Naval Hospital, turned out I had the mumps. As a result, I was taken off the ship. My gear had to be put ashore and sent to me at the hospital, and the ship sailed without me. Upon recovering from the mumps, I was assigned back to the amphibious base in Solomons, Maryland, still an ensign, and probably the only ensign in the United States Navy that was stateside that had 6 or 8 months sea duty aboard an LST. As a result, I was assigned to another new crew as the executive officer. We picked up a ship in the Boston Navy Yard, the LST 1002, and went overseas, made the invasion of Normandy invasion. Didn't arrive on D-Day. We got there, luckily, several weeks after D-Day. Made several runs between England and the Normandy beaches, made one run to the Brittany Beach area near Mont Saint-Michel, and then was sent back to the States. After coming and to New York, we tied up actually in New York City at Pier 50-something, I don't recall the exact pier number. After being put back into shape, We proceeded out to the Pacific, made a little late again, the Iwo Jima invasion, and then the Okinawa invasion. During the Okinawa invasion, after our home port was, main base was Saipan. We would run between Saipan and Okinawa, go back and forth. We received orders while we were at Saipan to proceed to Zamboanga in the Philippines to pick up elements of, I believe, the 5th Marine Division. We took them into China, landed at a port called Tacubaya, and from then on, we worked together with the Chinese Nationalist Army. Sometime during that period, I took command. I was commanding officer at that time. Shortly thereafter, after we kept making runs back and forth from Okinawa to back to Saipan and things, and then all along we did a lot of work along the Chinese coast with the Chinese, working with the Chinese Army. The war then came to an end, and we were out in that area, and we were put into the repatriation program. We would take the demobilized Jap troops from China back to Japan, and on the return trip would take either Korean or Chinese slave laborers that had been brought to Japan to work in the war factories, and we just kept doing that back and forth. So we had Korean laborers, we brought them back to Korea. If we had the Chinese, we brought them back to China. And on the return trip again, we would take the Jap troops back and forth. I was awarded, I was declared military necessity shortly after the war ended, because I was young and unmarried. I did not have too many discharge points. And when I became finally eligible for discharge, they could not replace me. So they declared me military necessity, which I believe allowed them to keep me 90 days beyond my discharge date. 90 days can grow into 120 days without, very easily. In any event, I was kept out there, and then I was sent back to the States, and not discharged, I was released to inactive duty. Sometime after I was released to inactive duty, I received an award from the Chinese government, nationalist government, that was forwarded to me by the United States Navy. Other than that, my story is like everybody else. I have all the campaign medals. I also have a French award, a medallion from the French government for my duty while I was in the European theater. And I came back, and I was very happy to come back. I was offered a spot promotion while I was out there with the 7th Fleet before I came home to lieutenant commander, and would be in command of either a small transport or a small cargo ship. But like everybody else, I wanted to get home. I did what I did because everybody else did it, and I was very proud to do it, but I wanted to get home. We had a just cause, a reason to fight. In my mind, war is only proper when it's necessary. And we had a necessary war, and we necessarily had to go, and we necessarily had to do what we did. And when it was over, it was over.
My name is Henry Davis. I'm a veteran of World War II. I live in Great Neck, and my story is like every other GI story, and there were 11 million of us, different. I served with an anti-aircraft unit. Every one of their stories different. My career began when my graduating class of Brooklyn College, 1943, was told you'll be allowed to go to your graduation day, but then you must go into the Army. And they kept their word. In other words, the war was already on for a full year, but we were allowed to graduate. And then, miraculously, the entire male contingent of that class was sent to Fort Eustis, Virginia, and we were matched by an equal number of guys from Purdue University. And so you had the eggheads from New York and the engineers and mechanics from Purdue, all learning how to handle what to us was a gigantic cannon, the equivalent of the German 88 cannon used to fire shells laterally and to hit American or British planes up high. The American 90 millimeter gun was the equivalent, and that's what we were to learn. And so with 18 men on each gun, we had maybe 20 gun teams throughout the excruciatingly hot summer of 1943 in Virginia, sweating every day and learning how to run that gun. The Purdue engineers knew everything immediately. The Brooklyn College contingent were about 5 weeks behind at all times, but we all ended up knowing what we were doing. I became one of two key men on the gun, 18 guys loading the shells in. I don't remember half the other titles, but the two key men were the guy on the left of the bore, this guy, and he was the azimuth setter, and by turning his wheel, the bore moved thus, and there's the plane going by. I, on the right side of the bore, was the elevation setter, up and down. We practiced for days, for weeks. We went out to Virginia Beach, a whole 5 or 6 cannons at a time, airplanes towing sleeves behind, flew across the ocean, and we never hit a thing. With all that training, this was a very complicated gun. I was sent uniform, rifle, all my stuff in a barracks bag to Fort Meade, Virginia, where I wasted a week or two. And then my next orders were, I will travel to Camp Shanks. Now, Camp Shanks was the greatest secret of the war. It was only 40 miles north of New York on the west side of the Hudson, and nobody knew about it. Nobody. You can't talk about Shanks. And there, I was housed all by my lonesome, waiting to be assigned to some new unit. Of course, it would have to be an anti-aircraft unit. Now, I'll remind you that my 13, 17 weeks of basic training were on this 90 millimeter, quite cumbersome. This outfit that I'm now going to join is the 459th Anti-Aircraft Battalion, and it's a 40 millimeter. Totally different. It's like a cannon versus a small machine gun. No sooner had I gotten there for 3 or 4 days, I realized I'm surrounded by a bunch of nice hillbillies and not Brooklyn College grads. But in the Army, you learn to adapt. We got on a ship, a ferry, to take us to the west side docks, and there was the HMS His Majesty's ship Scythia, an old Cunard line ship that was about 25 years old by then. But the U.S. and the British and French and others were running out of ships, and so you had to get on any kind of vessel across the Atlantic. I should jump 3 years later. It's now time to go home with a million misadventures in between. And the night before we were to go to the ship, we were in Belgium now, 4 or 5 of us went into Antwerp, and we caroused. We drank, we went to the dog races, and we came back late. And the guard at the gate said, "You jackasses, your outfit is gone. They went to the ship." he said, go into your bunk, which is empty, no beds, no cots, no nothing, no stove, and we'll get you up early in the morning, you'll have breakfast, and we'll pray that your ship hasn't left. Imagine 3.5 years in Europe and you miss your ship home. They got a Jeep driver who I thought beats every New York City cab driver, because we told him our plight, and he zigged and zagged through the Antwerp streets, and the smoke was already coming out of the vessel that was still going to take us home. We didn't know where our barracks bags were and our belongings, but they being the guys that had stayed in camp, had brought us stuff there, and we were the last 5 guys on the ship. And I decided I'm going to make history. So I let the other 4 guys go up first. And so as a result, I'm probably the only GI in the entire American Army who ever was first on one ship going to Europe and the last to get on the return ship.
In 1942, I enlisted in the Air Corps. It's you go for training to be a pilot, a navigator, or a bombardier. One of the 3. Okay. And when the day that I was called, we assembled in Penn Station, and they took us to Atlantic City. And we were there for 2 months, like a basic training, actually, okay? We then, after a few months, contingent of us was sent to Syracuse University, something they called CTD, College Training Something or Other, where we learned Morse code. They took us up in a small Taylor Cub to get the feeling of being in the air, and a few other little details which I just possibly can't remember. Now, after that, we were sent down to San Antonio. And San Antonio was called the San Antonio Army Air something. And again, we went through basic training all over again. And then I was sent, along with other people, to Corsicana, Texas. In Corsicana, Texas, I trained to be a pilot. And I soloed after 8 hours of training. I was doing very well. And I really, it's not that I loved it. They taught you all sorts of Immelmans, stalls, spins, and I soloed like about 30 hours, and I did 60 hours, what they call primary training. If you pass that, which I did with flying colors, they send you to basic, which is a much heavier aircraft. It's closer to a combat aircraft. We flew BT-14s, the North Americans, and this was a base in Independence, Kansas, as I recall. And it was very complicated. We did cross-country, night flying, we did link training. I had about 15, 20 hours, and this is mostly solo, and where I was supposed to park my plane, there was a person directing you, and he directed me, and I made an error. I think it was an error, maybe it was his error. I ran into another plane. Don't ask what I set off, okay? And I didn't even damage the other plane. They automatically, they washed me out, which they never should have done, because I think I would have made a good pilot. Anyhow, from there, they sent me to Monroe, Louisiana. Again, there was like a reassembling, and they asked me, where do you want to go? You can't do the pilot anymore. You got to do either a navigator or a bombardier. So I said, I'll take the bombardier. What the heck? So from there, they sent me to West Texas, to a town, San Angelo, where we learned how to use the Norden bomb sight, which was very hot at the time. The Norden bomb sight is an incredible invention because on the bomb run, which usually takes just a few minutes, hopefully it's upwind, the bomb sight flies the airplane. The plane is put on autopilot by the pilot, and the bomb sight flies the plane. Okay? Only one person used the bomb sight, the one leading the group. You had to follow orders. You had to, there was an area called the turning point to the bomb run, which usually took about 5 minutes or so, or 10 minutes, I don't remember, I never timed it, where I went down to the bomb bay and I armed the bombs. Because until that time, they wouldn't leave the bomb bay. And I opened, at that point, went back to my position, opened the bomb bay doors. I first had to wait for everybody else in front of me to open their doors. When I saw their doors open, I opened my doors. Then I set up the bomb sight so that when I saw that first bomb leaving the bomb bay of the plane in front of me, I had a salvo handle, which I pushed forward, released all the bombs. Never once used the bomb sight, okay, with all that training. However, just in case we lost the lead bombardier, I'm ready to take over, okay? That's what all this training was all about. Worthwhile? Absolutely. Could never do without that. Finally graduated there, was sent to Westover Field, where I met my crew, my guys, there they were. And we trained there. And then, when we were ready, they sent us to Mitchell Field, right here. The 4 commissioned officers, the pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, navigator, an engineer, a radio operator, a tail gunner, a belly gunner, a Martin gunner, and a waist gunner. When we were ready to go overseas, we flew up to Bangor, Maine, which at that time was a port of embarkation. And we flew to Labrador. This is the middle of winter. I think it was very cold. And I remember the underground passages to get from one building to another, and the maintenance crew were all Eskimos. I was very taken by this native Eskimos. Anyhow, then something happened, I don't remember, but we had to fly to Newfoundland, a little south of Labrador. From there, we finally got our orders. We flew to the Azores. From the Azores, we flew to French Morocco. At that time, it was called French Morocco. We spent a couple of days there. From there, we flew to Tunisia. And from there, we flew into Cerignola, the base in Italy. I found my name on the board one night. Of course, I didn't sleep that night. And I went on a mission. And then a few days later, I was supposed to go on another mission. I was omitted from the group. I got orders to join another group. I wanted to stay with my crew. It's funny how you're living with people. You are so close, you just have no idea. You will never experience this, but when you're 19 or 20, and you're with guys 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you fly with them, and your life depends upon everybody, okay? You get very close to these people, especially the 4 commissioned officers. They're like they're closer than brothers. That was my disappointment. I didn't give a rap about anything else. I really didn't. And I was so, this is history. I never found out why these things happen. I then got orders to go back to the States because they wanted me to train bombardiers in B-29s. I had never seen a B-29. I didn't even know how it works. And I said to myself, why do they pick me? I have very limited experience to be an instructor in B-29s when I have never seen one. And I think my commanding officer said to me, they're all the same. Okay, fine. So I was waiting to be assigned to my first flight, and it never came. And so I went to the CO, and I said, I'm ready to go. Give me the students, at least let me fly and get used to being in a 29. First of all, it was great because we used to fly in combat missions at 26,000 feet. And you have no idea how much clothing. I have a picture of what I had to wear. The first thing, of course, you had long johns you put on, all right? I then had an extra shirt. I then put on an electric suit, had wires all over it, top and bottom, right? And on top of that, you had flying fatigues. On top of that, you had a leather pants and a leather jacket. And then all kinds of head coverings. And part of the problem I had is when I had to go, I had to maintain one of the guns before we got into the turning point, where I had to go from the Martin turret, which was above the pilot. The Martin turret had twin 50 caliber machine guns. It's heavy duty with those machine guns. And I had to get from that position to the front, to the bomb site, okay? In order to do that, there was a very narrow passageway. I had to carry a 5 or 10 pound bottle of oxygen. I had to detach myself from the central station, which supplied everybody, and God help if the flak cut that system, because at 20,000 feet, you're going to die from lack of oxygen. And I took this little tank, I cuddled it somehow, and I got through that passage. And then, of course, trying to wedge your way through the passage, you use more oxygen because you get a little excited, okay? And you finally hook up to the main. This was one of my greatest fear. Plus the flak suits that you wear, because if any flak, it was a steel bars you put across the top of everything. And I used to put one underneath my crotch too, just in case. Didn't want to lose that, okay? However, where was I? Oh yes, in the 29s. And the CEO said, look, we're having an adjustment here. So I said, I can't just sit around and do something. He said, well, there's an opening here. You can be the assistant to the person who supervises the officers club. So I got into the restaurant business. Okay. Then I was there for a while. Then, of course, they dropped the atom bomb. And I went to Fort Dix, and I got mustered out. What we need is to be very well aware of the world around us and what is happening and what threatens us and what we can do about it in a very meaningful way. And I think that we need an awakening right now, okay? I say that because I'm very disturbed by our brave American soldiers being killed left and right every day. And my feeling is this should not happen.